Hi, you're listening to God, Ghosts, and Government, a weekly conversation with Senator Kim Jackson, where she'll reflect on her journey as an Episcopal priest, farmer, legislator, and much more. I'm your host, Sharitha J., and I'm honored to share this space with you. Let's begin. Hey, it's your girl Sharitha J, and we're back for another episode of God, Goats, and Government. Hey, Senator Jackson.
Hey girl, how you doing?
Well, I think I'm doing pretty well, but the question is, how are you?
Girl, I'm here. I'm grateful to be here. And that's about all I got for you.
We'll take that. I want to invite our listeners to take a moment, if they will, to check out our latest or our previous episode of GG and G, God, Ghosts, and Government, where we took time to talk about how it works. We got into some pretty interesting conversations and invited in your chief of staff, Aaron Castle, and learned some things that I think you and I both kind of needed a refresher in. So I'm I'm
That's
I'm
right.
hoping I'm hoping we can keep that trend going and figuring out how this thing works as we move forward in session. But that said, glad you're here. You look wonderful. This is for our folks who are catching it on YouTube. And we're just gonna hop right in. Is that all right with you?
Let's do it. Let's jump.
Excellent. So, Senator Jackson, I realize as we've continued to map out this session, this is God, goats, and government, and we've been getting into a lot of government because it's legislative session. But what have you seen God lately? What does that look like under the gold dome for you? Where's God?
Of course, you would ask that question like during what really has been one of the hardest weeks of my life ever in this Gold Dome. So maybe I appreciate the question, maybe I don't. I don't know. But I think it's been hard to see God in the midst of all of this. But I'm grateful for people who've come down who've tried to share a bit of who God is with me at the ropes and in my emails. It's been rough. I've gotten a lot of hate this week, and so it's hard to see
Mm,
God in the midst of a lot of hate. But I think the biggest God moment that I had this week was a text message that I received from a colleague who's in the house in response to a speech that I gave from the well. She texted me probably 11:30 at night and just said, this is my first time getting a chance to hear your speech. I know it's late, but I just want to tell you how much it means to me. I finally feel seen. I finally feel heard. And so for me, that was very much a God moment. And I think for my colleagues for whom I did not vote with them on this, they probably would say that it was not a God moment. So yeah, maybe we should talk about that.
mm, mm. Well, for our listeners, Senator Jackson, I know how you love knowing the name of bills and numbers. We are discussing the latest bill, HB 30, that came up on the, was it the House side? How is this working for? How did we get to your side of things with this particular bill?
Yeah, as HB would indicate, it did start in the House. It actually passed the House last year and then it stalled
Mm,
out in the Senate. So it didn't get through the Senate and then it came. That means because we're a 2-year session, so anything that didn't pass last year, it goes back to where it was in the last time. So the last time I got a hearing, it was in Senate Judy, so it went back to Senate Judy for reconsideration. So that's how we ended up with it on the Senate floor last week.
okay. Well, Senator Jackson, Kim, really, as someone who gets to kind of observe you and see all the ways that you show up, and I know I definitely don't take it lightly, and I hope our listeners don't take it lightly. When you say that these things, this moment has been hard because you make it. a bit of your brand to stand up for the hard things, and you do so in such a way that you almost make it look easy. So I'm grateful that you're sharing the other side of things, what it looks like and how it feels to be in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe we should say something about what HB 30 is.
yeah,
And that's not the only bill that was hard either. I should just say, like, it was a panoply of difficultness this
mm,
week. But HB 30 is a bill about anti-Semitism. It seeks to define what anti-Semitism is in order to help prosecutors when trying to prosecute a hate crime. It helps them know what anti-Semitism is by defining it. And it also defines anti-Semitism for state agencies so that when they are looking at non-criminal things like trying to like fire somebody for discrimination, that they'll know what anti-Semitism is based on this definition.
hmm,
On its face, that seems straightforward. On its face, of course, I'm against anti-Semitism, like for a whole host of reasons, but namely because humans are humans and nobody deserves hate. Um, I am obviously against anti-Semitism, but I did end up voting no on the bill because of the definitions and the examples that were given in the definition about anti-Semitism. From my read of the bill, it was an infringement on people's right to criticize Israel. And and as someone who's been to Israel and who's gone through checkpoints in order to get into Bethlehem,
hmm,
uh, I think that we have a right and a responsibility to be able to call out the state of Israel for their actions against the Palestinians. And the way I read that bill is that that makes it murky. And obviously, other people interpret it differently. But I had a lot of friends and people that I consider dear friends and thought partners in this work who also agreed with me that that is the reading of the bill. And so um, I was one of 5 no votes
wow.
on the Senate floor. We were a small coalition of people, and it was hard, but I
Mm,
still believe that it was right despite all the hate. And I mean, the amount of vitriol that has poured into my inbox as a result of that vote is astounding. It's very fascinating to receive hate in response to a vote that's supposed to be about stopping hate, right? Like the irony of that is wild.
mm,
But there has just been, I didn't know that people I did know, I guess I didn't know what it would feel like to receive so much vitriol on my social media, in my inbox, even on the phone. It's just been really, really difficult. And the last thing I'll say about that right now is that it's also been
mm,
unfairly difficult because my decision was made with clarity. I mean, I spoke from the well, and we can maybe play a clip of that. I'm very clear that I am against anti-Semitism. Like, there's no question about that. And when a group of Jewish people come to you and say, "Hey, this is going to hurt other Jewish people too," um, I decided to listen to them. I decided to believe them. And so I voted with other Jewish people who believe differently. I voted with Palestinian students who are afraid that they're going to get kicked out of school. I voted my conscience. I voted my heart. I voted in a way that says I believe that you should be able to say out loud that the state of Israel is participating in racism. It has racist elements to it as a state in the same way that I can say that about the United States. The United States was founded and has racism rooted throughout its core. I
mm,
can say that unashamedly and definitively and not be afraid of being arrested or charged with discrimination about this country. And I think that you should be able to say that about Israel as well.
mm. Again, thank you um, for listening. I know it's not easy to be on the other side of what's popular, right, to vote for. And it just sounds like, as you said, that you have received quite a bit of unfairness in this. However, I'm curious about what's keeping you grounded um, in these moments, and what that has looked like for you in this week. You also shared that HB 30 wasn't the only challenging bill that you heard.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's keeping me grounded is this kind of deep core commitment to trying to follow my gut, following my heart. I could be wrong at the end of the day about my legal interpretation of that bill, and I'm sure some courts will decide that for me. But I know that when I went to sleep that night, I followed my core, my center, because I the principles and foundations that I walk into this room with every day, I stay true to those. And so that's what's keeping me grounded. It's what kept me grounded. We had this weird pharmacy bill that's like super weedy, so we don't have to get into it. But it resulted in me also getting a lot of vitriol and a lot of hate for how I voted. And again,
I
I
mean,
just go ahead.
just keep it going. I mean, if you're gonna do it all the way.
All right.
Okay.
Right. I mean, the irony is the people that are mad at me are people who typically are on, like, we are on the same side. That's what's wild about it, right? So, like, Jewish people typically, because of the kinship that we have, I think, as marginalized communities, like, Jewish folks tend to roll with me. A whole lot of them are mad at me. There's a whole lot that aren't, but there are a whole lot that are. And with the pharmacy bill, there are a whole lot of people who have, like, lupus and cancer and HIV and these kind of specialty these difficult diseases that require specialty drugs that are also like mad at me. Like somebody came up to me and was like, Kim, you don't care about people with lupus. And I'm like, what? Of course I care. What in my life? I mean, I didn't ask this out loud, but this is what went through my brain was tell me what about how I live my everyday life, the things that I do, the work that I've done. Tell me what about it indicates to you that I don't care about anybody. Like
Mm,
I feel like the work that I've done should speak for me and for my values, and that the work that you and I do, Sharitha, should make it really clear to people that we care about folks who are marginalized, who are struggling. Um, but all of that, none of that mattered last week. At least to the people who
mm.
were angry with me, none of that mattered. And so, yeah, but I'm okay. We take the licks and keep on going.
I know. Look, I know you can take a hit, but it's this. We know this, especially going into a year where it's a presidential election, right? It's politics already can be polarizing, so it's just very interesting. And you pointed this out in your previous episode when you were talking about how it works and what it looks like when you guys are voting on the floor, and to have this moment where you look over and when you think someone is going to vote the same as you, and then they have a different color, a different vote. And so this sounds like this is one of those instances in which it's happened and you are navigating the waters.
Yeah, yeah. The funny thing is, I actually was not in the minority opinion about this pharmacy bill, and it was in committee, and we actually defeated it. What I so because I got yelled at immediately before the vote and immediately after the vote, I think like it's wild. So because of all the yelling, I had a hard time taking in what was actually happening in the committee on a kind of a macro level. But
Mm-hmm.
Erin, my chief of staff, she was like, Kim, did you realize you took on a US congressman and like put him in his place? And so I was like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, because a US congressman, Buddy Carter, who is a pharmacist, he came down to testify for the bill. And I just asked him questions. But because all the things that were going on in my brain, it never occurred to me that I should like stop and think about what does it mean for me to question this US congressman. I just like went in on him. And so Aaron was like cheering for me when I came out, and I'm like, why are you cheering? Because everybody else was angry at me. She was like, you took him on. You did such a great job. So, there are good things that happen in all of this too. But this has been a particularly hard week, and I think that when you add, I'm still wounded from the swatting incident, and so when you add the swatting with the vitriol that's coming on the phones and in the emails, it makes me anxious again.
Look, how can we send you love?
Yeah, I always appreciate the shout outs that I get, and folks that you know send the nice emails and send the nice cards. Those are helpful, particularly in moments like this. And I will say, to the advocates who stood with me in my no vote to HB 30, they showed up. They were in the gallery. They were behind the ropes, and so I I knew that there was a small minority of people that I could go and that I was speaking to. And so those folks showed up, and then they flooded my inbox. Aaron says, so I was embargoed from my inbox, my email inbox for 3 days because there was so much coming in that was unpleasant. My staff just said, we'll take care of it. And I appreciate that. But Aaron said, 90% of the emails that you received in response to HB 30 were thank yous. They were words of gratitude from people who appreciate that you stood up for them. And so, 90-10, I appreciate the 90%. That's how you share love. Send me an email. I appreciate it. That says, I appreciate you. Send me an email that says, hey, I may not have agreed with you. I think those are the emails that have mattered the most to me, is the ones that said, I may not agree with you, but I respect that you stood up for what you believed in.
Both and. So let's take a quick listen to your speech from the well.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take a moment today to acknowledge a world of both and. The belief that things can be both devastating for one people and unspeakably atrocious for another. That we can mourn the loss of both Israeli and Palestinian lives. That we can both condemn the unacceptable acts of anti-Semitism that are plaguing the Jewish community around our state, and acknowledge that our citizens have the right to voice their dissent about the tremendous harm being enacted upon Palestinian civilians. Let me be clear. I stand unequivocally with the Jewish community here in Georgia and around the world, along with all of those who have experienced hate crimes and acts of violence, as I condemn all acts of anti-Semitism. I believe the Jewish community who has experienced great acts of violence deserves our support, compassion, and help. I mourn the devastating loss of Jewish lives at the hands of Hamas. To the entire Jewish community, I want you to know that I see you and I stand with you. And I also stand up for Palestinian lives. And I stand with those Jewish and non-Jewish voices that cry out for an end to the ravaging of an entire people. I stand with those who want protection from anti-Semitism, and with those living in the fear of the consequences that might come from speaking out against a government's actions. I refuse to accept this narrative that Jewish people who oppose this bill because of the wording that's in it, that they are not Jewish or that they are somehow less than those who support it. To all of my friends who oppose this bill, I want you to know that I see you and I stand with you. I will be voting no on HB 30 today because I personally know what it is to be a minority voice within a minority group. I know what it is to have people who share my race, my ethnicity, and my religion, and they choose to ignore my voice, choose to tell me that I'm not Christian enough or Black enough because of my deeply held convictions that don't align with the loudest voices. There will be Jewish people here today who will say she doesn't understand, she doesn't get it. And I rise to admit that as a non-Jewish person, there are undeniably some things that I don't get. But what I do get, what I understand in the depths of my soul because of my own personal, deeply painful experiences, what I do understand is that minorities within minoritized communities have unique points of view that deserve to be protected. It's not a coincidence that the community of people who support my vote today are minorities within minorities. They are Jews of color, they are queer, they are trans, they are Palestinian, they are Muslim, they are people who have often been ostracized by their own communities. My vote today is evidence of the fact that I value all voices. So as I close, in this world of both and, I hold close all of those who experience hate and violence. And on this day in particular, I hold close my Jewish and Israeli friends as they process their grief. And I also hold close those who choose to bravely speak out against the perpetuation of violence on a people. I sit in despair, holding the hand of my Palestinian friends as they weep for their community, feeling alone and ignored as their friends and family are slaughtered. As I look around this world that is deeply divided, I pray for a world of less either or, and instead for a world with more both and. May God bless all of us and bring us peace. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Both and.
Yeah, that's the world that I'm praying for, is a both and ultimately for a world of peace. Thanks, Sharita.
So, Senator Jackson, you talked about showing up, right, at the Capitol. What are some ways that folks can show up? Because one, I can tell you, I know people are showing up at the Capitol because we are having a hard time finding parking when doing morning prayer for Church of the Common Ground just across the street. So I see the buses that are showing up, but how can people show up? What's happening? Where can we get people under the Gold Dome in the coming
Yeah,
week?
so, Google the Capitol. And weirdly, when I Google it, the only thing that comes up for me is the Georgia Capitol Museum, which is where the Georgia Capitol is, so it'll get you there. But there's parking all around. There are parking lots that you'll have to pay for. They're paid lots. There's no real free parking necessarily, unless you, yeah, no, there's no free parking.
No.
But park or take the train on rainy days. I actually ride the train and it's quite pleasant. You take the Georgia State exit off of the train and walk up the hill to the Capitol. And then you have to have an ID in order to get in, which is, of course, a hurdle for many of our friends who are experiencing homelessness. But if you present your ID, you can come inside, and all the action takes place on the third floor. That's where the chambers are for the Senate and the House, and just ask folks, hey, like, where do I go? And you can ask actually for me to come out. Like, there's little pieces of paper, they're yellow pieces of paper, and there are these pages. Hey, by the way, I need some pages. If you were over the age of 12 and you want to be a page for the day, which means you're going to take the little yellow paper and put it on my desk, there's somebody who will do that for you. And you fill it out and say, hey, I'm like so and so. I'm here to say, yeah, like, yo, I listen to Guy Goes in Government, and I want to say, hey, they'll bring me that little piece of paper onto the floor, and when I get a chance, if we're not voting or if I'm not debating, I will come out and say, hey, at the ropes. or you can go up to the 4th floor and watch from the gallery. But I think it's really important, if you are going to come down here and it's your first time, reach out to my office. Just let us know, like, hey, shoot us an email, kim@kimforgeorgia.com, and just say, hey, I want to take you up on it. And we'll make sure you get first class treatment by having an intern accompany you through the whole process.
Wonderful. May I just say that as you were sharing about the process and getting into the Capitol, and yes, please have your ID when you come. I want you to know that our parishioners pray for you at morning prayer every time, and they point over and at the Gold Dome as though, and I want you to know, which is really important, especially for those who were listening to our previous episode, they know that you don't work in DC. And
That's
that
right.
is
That's right.
so they are aware that you are in DC, but I think they would be delighted to know if you were in DC, and they would cheer you on there as well. But they really do. They not only pray for you, but they pray for all the legislators that are doing this work. But I think it does something for morale, especially during this time of year where the weather's been so cold and things of that nature, to know that you are there. And so thank you for the invitation. And to our listeners, God Goes to Government, come by and say hello to Senator Jackson, reach out to her office. But we are going to honor time this week because you've named that it's been a difficult week. I do have one more ask, because if anything, we know that in spite of the weather or whatever's happening under the Gold Dome, what doesn't stop is that barnyard. How are your goats? How are things with the barnyard these days?
Yeah, let me tell you, my goats, we've said this before, hate rain. And the amount of rain that we are having is making them very cranky and very unhappy. And I'm just like, yo, I don't have any control over that. So I don't know why you like jumping up on me. But they're not happy with the rain. I think they don't really care about it being cold as much. So like the 20-degree weather doesn't bother them. But they hate the rain, and I hate the 20-degree weather because it adds probably a full hour to my morning just going through the process of like breaking up ice, bringing out like, I know that there are ways to solve this problem, but because it's only, it doesn't get cold very often, it hasn't felt like it was worth the investment of like getting heated. You can get heated waters and you can like wrap tape around the hoses and stuff. It hasn't seemed worth it. But let me tell you, the amount of time that I have spent carrying hot water from my house outside all the way to the barnyard, probably should have just paid for the heated stuff. um,
It
but
reminds me of Snowmageddon. Like no one was prepared. It's been 10 years. Okay. 2014. We were like, oh, city of Atlanta. We don't need snow plows. Okay.
right, that's
But
me. I don't need freeze mitigation things for my animals. I'm fine. It's Georgia. Well, let me tell you, breaking up ice in a feeder, like a water that is made out of galvanized metal, it is probably one of the most like physically difficult things that I've done, because you actually can't break it up. I had to learn this the hard way. It's solid. Like it's just a solid chunk of like 5-inch ice. And so I'm like beating it with a rock, beating it with a stick. Doesn't work. You actually have to like slide it out completely because you can't break it up because there's no water underneath it. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. Yeah.
it just sounds like some sort of metaphor for life or something. I don't know. I hope to hear it in a sermon. Who knows? Right?
I think there has to be something in there about what it is to choose on purpose not to prepare for cold weather. Um, but yeah, I mean the animals are great. They're happy. The rabbits, we have rabbits now. They love, 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 love. So, but before we go, I want to make sure I shout out my little boy Reese, turned 3, or as he says, T. On Sunday, so 2 days after this will be posted, he turned 3, and unfortunately, our household was sick with a flu bug, like a stomach bug thing. So we didn't have the party that we had hoped for, but he did get his little tractor, which I am so excited
Oh
about.
my goodness.
It's amazing. He's already like, even within his sickness, he definitely was out there like with the stomach thing, using his shovel to like put mulch in his little tractor. It was great. So we had a hard weekend in terms of just illness, and I had obviously had a hard week, but still joyous occasion as we celebrated his 3rd birthday.
Indeed. Well, I can't think of a better way than to conclude this episode. And may one day Reese listen to this wonderful archive and know that I wish him the happiest of birthdays. I hope that it was wonderful as he's turned, how does he say it? Tree?
Free.
Happy birthday, Reese. You all have been listening to another fantastic episode of God, Goats, and Government.
Until next time, like, subscribe, and please leave a comment because we love comments. Thanks,
We
everybody.
do.